Welcome to Green and Gold FC. We are joined by Melvyn Wilkez, who's joining us from England to talk about the Sunshine Coast Fire and their war with Football Queensland, their application for the national second tier, the OFC, and the academy which they've built in England. How are you going, Melvyn?
Not too bad, thank you, Graham. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, so we have heard a lot of complaints about how the national second tier, how that maybe travel is too much funding, but you guys apparently have are bringing kids all the way to England, which, if I am not mistaken, is even more expensive. So can you explain all that? The academy you're building here and how you're getting kids from Australia involved in the leagues over there?
Yeah, so it really started, Graham, if I can start from sort of the beginning without holding court too long. It's been sort of well documented that we had some issues with the state governing body in Queensland. Now, there's certain changes that have happened in the game in Queensland, which is, in our view, anti-development. So what we did was voiced our concerns and our opinion, and we felt we were unfairly treated to the point where we actually were de-affiliated at the end of 2023. So we'd actually seen this coming with the changes because it happened to a number of clubs prior to us as well, and it'll probably happen again. Now, that said, we'd already started to make some provisions in the event that this day was actually going to come. So it didn't come as a shock or a surprise because we were sort of forewarned it was coming by people close to the powers that be, and that were saying that they're gunning for you, so to speak. Anyway, what we did was we'd already put some measures in place, and because of my previous positions in the United Kingdom, working in professional football and working with the FA, I'd obviously built a reasonable network of credible and professional people that work at various levels and organisations, and some of them people actually run some of the most robust and professional youth leagues in the United Kingdom. So what I'd actually done since 2018, prior to our de-affiliation, I'd started to signpost some individual players that I believed are, of a level to go and test themselves in the European circles. So basically in the UK. It's nothing that I've invented or created, Graham. I'm not that smart. What I've actually done is researched, spoken to people like yourself who are immersed in the game at different levels. Australia was quite a powerhouse in the early 2000s, which you will well know, with the so-called, as they called, golden generation. And they were. And one of the reasons why they were such a powerhouse is because that early generation, or sort of mid 2000s generation, 20 players of the 23-man squad that competed in that Germany World Cup. 20 of them played in the top 3 leagues around the world. 13 of them played in the English Premier League. At that stage, they had the AIS, the Australian Institute of Sport in Canberra, and was funded. And then what they decided to do was change that structure. The NSL it was phased out prior to that. And then the A-League, the franchise system came in, and then slowly the funding for the game started to be withdrawn, and the AIS was withdrawn, or the football side from the AIS was withdrawn for the men's. So that then culminated in the national teams then starting to go through some cold winters. So you've only got to look at the results from 2014 onwards, how the senior men's team have done, to see that there's a struggle going on. And the struggle is the game is ever changing in Australia. And instead of actually fine-tuning what they've got, which was a powerful model, they keep chucking the baby out with the bathwater. So this has been a continuous frustration of ours as a football club, because I moved to Australia in 2014, and I actually moved on the back of what I'd seen in the golden generation, or the golden era of football in Australia, and actually thought it was in a very, very powerful state. What I've actually witnessed over the 11 years whilst I've been in Australia is the game go backwards at a rapid rate of knots.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in the NSL era, we had a system where, in principle, any club which got their act together could appear in the National Soccer League. Of course, there was quite a process to do it, but it was something that it'd be a realistic goal for a club to get there. We also had National Youth League, as well as Colts appear in that National Youth League, as well as the IS. So there's been a pretty dramatic change in our pathways. And on top of that, of course, it wasn't until 2014, 2015 that we even had underage squads at all in our top division in the A League, whereas before you have all the way from under six up to Colts and National Youth League, then reserve grade. So I believe your struggles with the governance, they were twofold, right? The first was they wanted to no longer have a statewide Queensland Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, it appeared from the outside that there was a bit of a war over your entry into the national second tier. Is that correct, or were there other issues as well?
Yeah, there's a number of issues that arise from that, but there's other things that I won't sort of disclose at this stage that also put the nails in the coffin, I would say. But there's been a change in structure. And the change in structure is, particularly in the junior circles, there's no such thing as National Premier League juniors anymore in Queensland. So that national mantra, which was a powerful branding, is now gone. It's now Football Queensland Academy. So we voiced our opinion on that we felt they were devaluing the actual program and actually disadvantaging the players for their potential to be viewed overseas. Because if you put a player forwards I put Graham forwards as an under-16 National Premier League player in Queensland, any football club in the UK or any part of the world would have an interest in Graham because of the mantra or the brand of National Premier League. You know, Graham plays in the NPL, so he must be within the top bracket of footballers in that state. The minute you change it from NPL, National Premier League, to Football Queensland Academy, it actually sounds like an extension of the community competition. And in our view, it's all to do with power and control. So that's where I felt the game was being disadvantaged, because if Graham did actually want to move to another national association, it was a harder recommendation for me to put Graham forwards to that potential club in that national association, just purely because the brand had changed and people going, it just sounds rubbish, Mel. It doesn't sound like the same thing. So that was one of the nails in the coffin. Now, the other one was, and they'll refute this, that we made the application for the national second tier. Now, we were one of the 30-odd clubs at the very beginning that, you know, helped the AAFC, the Association for Australian Football Clubs, who actually pulled it together and did a fabulous job. Now, we got it to the white paper stage and had a report done. I say we, because we were part of the AAFC. The management group who did that did a fabulous job, as did the people who pulled the report together, which then presented it to Football Australia as a viable model. Now, from that process, Football Australia were like, yeah, looks good, let's go with it. And what we'll do is we'll open up the process for expression of interest. And every club in the country was invited to apply. And there were certain criteria, as well as some finance attached to that, which, you know, you sort of understand that, you know, if you're serious, there's got to be some sort of level of commitment in terms of finance attached to that EOI. But also your submission, your material a part of that EOI has got to be robust. And you have to demonstrate your football program, and not senior football program, your football program as a whole, so your underpinning youth program and your funding model going forwards, and all the things that go with that in terms of facilities and structure. So, and we demonstrated that extremely well, which then led us to being offered an opportunity to put together a request for proposal, the RFP stage. So that then saw us, we had to sign some confidentiality agreements, and we were provided some templates, but then we have to put then the bid together for the RFP phase. So there was, I can't remember the exact figure, Graham. I'd be guessing, but I'm going to say 20 clubs were put forward for the RFP stage, and we were one of them clubs. We put a very, very robust proposal together. We had a meeting with Football Australia. We had a number of meetings with Football Australia. And then we had a final meeting with BDO, who were their independent body, to help assess the bids. And we were successful on that technical element. So everything we did, our program, our funding model, the whole bells and whistles, we were successful, and we were provided an opportunity for a position as a foundation club in the national second tier. In between that and us actually signing off on that, we then received the letters from Football Queensland's lawyers telling us we now have no right for further participation in their competitions. So it's a power play. So People make the assumption that, that's, probably attached to us putting a bid together and being seen as too big for Football Queensland because then we're operating with Football Australia. Not sure whether there's any truth in that myself, but a lot of people have speculated that. So you let them speculate. But what happened then was there was no junior games program for our full-time academy. So we've got the only full-time football program in Australia. So we have players from the ages of 18 all the way 8 to 18 that train 16 hours a week. We have full-time sports scientists, strength and conditioning coaches. We fund their private tuition. It's an identical model to what the academy system is in the United Kingdom at Category 1 level. And we work to the same parameters as the EPPP, the Elite Player Performance Plan in the UK. We're right on the time frame of a Category 1 academy. So our view is Football Queensland didn't like that because they wanted football clubs to be part-time. And we were, I'll use the word mavericks, that's quite an arrogant statement, but mavericks, let's use that word. And we wanted to drive the game forwards and we wanted to contribute significantly to the game in Australia. Football Queensland didn't like that because what happened then is they introduced an academy assessment process. I actually think an academy assessment process is a positive move because what it does do is it benchmarks clubs, with best practice. However, rather than engaging an independent company to do the assessment like they do in the United Kingdom, what they decided to do was utilise their own staff who have no experience or had no experience in conducting assessments and audits. So what was happening was that material was very subjective. It was a weighted system, and again, very subjective. You're either doing something well or you're not doing it at all. You don't do the bit in between. And they're sort of playing God with clubs and programs. Lo and behold, after we invest probably about $2.4 million a year in our Australian academy, and we have highly qualified staff, such as myself and other people, delivering full-time, associate professors in sport and exercise science and physiology, leading our performance program, and Olympic strength and conditioning coaches. We're then sort of dismayed when we get a member of staff from Football Queensland come out who has probably done, and I'm not being disrespectful here, probably got himself a 2-1 degree at some university in the United Kingdom, and then is trying to tell our professor in sports science about sports science and then giving us a knockdown weighted score. Then you start to make the assumption that it has nothing to do with the program we're actually running. It's actually to do with politics. And because Sunshine Coast are very vocal and Melvyn and the owners of Sunshine Coast are quite vocal, we'll put them in their box and we'll go, there you go, mate. You can be a middle of the road club. So gold, silver and bronze, we'll put you as silver. Now, there's a club in Brisbane that, I'm not going to name them because it'd be unprofessional and not fair, but there's a club in Brisbane that didn't have a sports science program, and actually after they received their gold rating actually told people we're now going to be bringing in a sports science program next year, yet they were given a gold rating. We had all this in place and we were given a silver rating. So we provided this material to Football Queensland and basically said we think there's an agenda. Well, it's clear there's an agenda, and we actually submitted an appeal through one of the bylaws. We had to pay money for that appeal, and Football Queensland sent the money back and say, no, we don't want the appeal.
So how does this happen? I hear a lot of people complaining about the governance in our game, but can you take us through some of the details about why is it that clubs basically aren't running the game? Why aren't the stakeholders running the game? Why does it seem like the governments basically can have the power to lord it over the people that they should be serving?
Yeah, so they made some changes. This is another one where we sort of voiced our view. Now, again, our club, our senior management team and club owners, they're actually lawyers and very, very good lawyers at that. So, and they actually wrote a lot of the bylaws for Football Queensland and actually did a lot of work for Football Australia in a consultancy capacity in yesteryear. So they're quite well versed in the governance and the legalities in football, particularly around the paperwork side. Now, what happened was there was a change in guard at the state body, and a new regime came in. That's fine, things change. There's no issue with that. But then, but you're an Aussie yourself, Graham, so you might recall that, particularly in Queensland, there used to be zones. So Sunshine Coast had a zone, Toowoomba, Wide Bay, Gold Coast. They'd all have these, I suppose, county FAs, if you like, in the UK, but they're zones. So what they basically do is they run the game on. So I'll use Sunshine Coast as an example because that's where I'm from. So Sunshine Coast Zone would run the game on Sunshine Coast, and if there was any issues, you'd be able to pick the phone up and speak to the ladies there who were fabulous, and deal with your issue pretty much immediately. So they weren't perfect, but show me an organisation that is. But they were really, really good. Now, what happened was Football Queensland then decided that they were going to disband all the zones. Now, our owners, because they helped put the constitution together and the bylaws, they were quite vocal in telling clubs, be careful, because I tell you what's going to happen here is it's all about control and power and there's no recourse. So each zone, Graham, had 2 votes to nominate and remove people from the board at Football Queensland, including the CEO. Now, by removing the zones, that then removes them votes. So the clubs, in effect, from them zones can actually, if me and you are the representatives from the zones, our clubs on the Sunshine Coast would then say, Mel, you need to go in and you need to do this, this, and this, and Graham, can you support him? And we would have a vote at the AGM. Now, what happened was they removed all the zones, which meant all the finance then went centrally to the head office in Logan, and then all the game, the structure of the game, then also went to head office in Logan. In principle, you go, well, and everybody uses this buzzword about streamlining, and it sounds great in theory, but we know practically, if it's hammering down, with rain in Wide Bay or Sunshine Coast, it could be bright sunshine down in Logan at the bottom end of Brisbane. So, and when you actually try and pick the phone up to phone somebody in Brisbane to ask a question about football and Sunshine Coast, you're either sat there on the phone forever or you get an answer machine. Whereas when the zones were in place, you'd have a mobile phone you could call and you'd get somebody who'd pick up almost immediately or return your call in a timely manner. So by removing them zones, they removed the votes, which meant they didn't retain more power to maintain position at board level at Football Queensland.
I see. Then that sounds, once you have that centralised power and remove those accountability measures, it's very difficult to reverse that, I imagine.
You can't do it. What happened was we went to a meeting in Maroochydore, and my boss, our MD, he was quite vocal in the meeting and said, we just gave them, the people in the room, an insight on, if this happens, this is what could happen, which ironically did happen, and there's no recourse. Once you vote for this change and it goes through, it's ratified, you can't then change and go, oh, we need to change it back now because we're not happy. And ironically, that's exactly what's been happening this last, certainly 18 months. Clubs have been extremely unhappy and with the way the game's being run. But that's what they voted for. Sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for, don't you, Graham?
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to your request for the proposal, there's been a lot of secrecy, a lot of speculation about the criteria, because we know that clubs wouldn't apply for these RFPs if they knew that they weren't compliant.
Yes.
Their bids weren't compliant.
Yeah.
So that tells me that some of the criteria must be vague or qualitative or maybe a little bit strange. I don't know how much you can disclose, because I do know that they, for some reason, protected these under the NDAs. But could you give a general comment about the criteria?
Yeah, so some of the criteria is bizarre, strange, but it's we are covered on a confidentiality agreement, even though we officially withdrew. Football Australia have still left the door open for us to step through it. But I'll talk about that in a bit, because as we speak, we're definitely not going to be stepping through any doors whilst the game's in the position that it's in Australia. Some of the requests for proposal line items is extremely unachievable for a large proportion of clubs, because what they're actually in effect doing is asking football clubs to transition to basically full-time, which we are. So we were geared up because we prepared this 7-8 years ago, a large number of years prior to where we are today, sort of thing. So, but in terms of providing any specific information, we're actually still, I believe, under the confidentiality agreement. That might not be the case because we withdrew. I'll have to get some advice from our legal team, our owners, on that. And it might be another conversation, another podcast on another day, and maybe bring our owners into it and let them discuss, because, they're not too bothered about tackling the legal side.
Oh, that'd be brilliant. There's been so much secrecy about the process.
Yeah.
And as you know, in Australia, there's probably a lot of divisions in our game, particularly due to how the A-League started and due to the relationship between the governing body and perceptions that, maybe clubs which are brought about by migrant communities are not particularly welcome, as well as the makeup of the current board of Football Australia. There has been a lot of perceptions that can we trust
Yeah.
Football Australia to have our best interests at
Yeah.
heart.
But Graham, I actually think, apologies to cut in on you, I think in principle, the National Second Division, or the Championship as it's called, I think it's a really good move. I think it's a good move forward, a positive move. And it's something that we wholeheartedly supported and still actually continue to do so. It's just the bureaucracy and the red tape surrounding what that looks like is unachievable for football clubs, particularly when it actually puts clubs in a precarious position in terms of finances, because you've only got to look at, and I'm not sure whether this has been ratified yet. You might be able to tell me or not because you're in the UK, but Morecambe FC in the UK I think, have gone to the wall over the last 24 hours. So you have to be careful when you run these leagues and operations, because let's just talk about brass tacks for a second. Let's talk on a shop floor level. So if there is a league of, let's say, 12 or 14 teams, so let's just go down that. You don't need an army of 20 odd members of staff to run a 14 league competition. 100% you don't. So I've been a part of leagues, and I was actually part of a technical working group of a league, albeit a youth league in the UK, in 2006 all the way through till 2011. And there was about 5 or 6 of us that were actually engaged in that league. 3 people were paid full time, and they had 40 odd teams. Now, I appreciate, we weren't televised, and, it wasn't professionalised, it was youth level. But you don't need an army of staff on astronomical salaries to run a 14-team competition. So in our view, we put our opinion across in a paper and told them that the finance they were requesting from football clubs, if they reduced that significantly and engaged a large number of sponsors, and they did actually have a big sponsor that indicated they wanted to come on board, but they wanted the money to go to the football clubs and not actually into the governing body. Not sure where that conversation has actually gone since then, but there seems to be less reinvestment in the game and more about, let's get as much money as we can in our coffers in terms of the governing bodies to employ as many people as we can. So I just think they've gone about it in the wrong way. That's our view. Other people, watching this podcast might have a different view, Graham, and they go, "No, I think, Melvyn, you're wrong." That's fine. Everybody's got an opinion. I'm not precious about that. But having been involved in this in 2 countries now and seeing the difference between the two, it really alarms me that the amount of money that's being asked of football clubs and players in Australia, which contributes to running competitions and running football clubs, it worries me. And it worries me as a parent, Graham. That's what it worries me as.
Yeah, it is strange that we are not a football powerhouse, and yet second tier, we're looking for flashier products, and you're having a lot of established football countries.
Yeah.
By the bits and bobs I'm getting coming through. So you mentioned that the door is not closed, but you're not walking through it. What would be the conditions for Sunshine Coast to throw their hat back in the ring?
Yeah. So I can share this with you because it's factual. So we've been approached by Football Australia 2 or 3 times. I had a meeting with a delegate from Football Australia in Adelaide last April, and they were pretty adamant, please, we would love you to be part. Our bid's quite good, with the full-time academy. We've got a proper football club full time. So, and, financially, we could make it happen. It's not a case of the finance, but what it does stem around is there's no football club on the planet, Graham, that is at any reasonable level that doesn't have a youth development program operating week to week, which is servicing your next generation of players. So what we said to Football Australia when it got down to the nuts and bolts was, you fix our program, our youngsters, with Football Queensland, and tell them, not ask them, tell them that we need to be in their junior competition, because that's our conveyor belt of senior players, like every professional football club around the world. And then we will jump in at National Second Division and be part of the foundation clubs. I got a text message back, and I'm happy to share this, to say, unfortunately, Mel, we could not work with Football Queensland. That came from Football Australia. So at the moment, the tail is wagging the dog.
Oh, wow. Is there any Hail Marys that you can do, like have your youth play in Northern New South Wales or something?
Yeah, so we actually We actually approached New South Wales. We actually had meetings with Football Victoria. The issue we've got is, we believe, a lot of the CEOs talk to each other, and it's a very sort of closed shop. So we did look at it. We were looking to fly players into Victoria on a weekly basis. People go, "Oh, that's not sustainable." Well, it is if you're willing to fund it. So that's what we were willing to do. Hence why we're now in the United Kingdom, where I'm sat now, and we've got this program. So people must have thought we were full of crap by going, "Oh, we'll fly them in." No, we were genuine and serious because we pride ourselves on youth development programs and developing players. We've got players that are over here in the UK. We've got players in France. We've still got players in the A League, the Brisbane Roar Women, Brisbane Roar Men. So we've contributed to football and continue to do so. The issue we had was we were being professionalised too quickly, and the powers that be didn't like it. They couldn't control us.
So if tomorrow your youth were allowed to be in any state, federation in Australia, if that was permitted, would you consider going back and applying again for the national second tier?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's an amazing failure of governance because that's a pretty reasonable request.
Yeah.
So hopefully, if there's anyone out there who knows a governing body, please email Sunshine Coast Fire. So let's move on to the. Oh, sorry.
No, but I was just going to say, we actually don't let the grass grow, Graham. We don't wait for people like no. We'll start to put some measures in our place. So what we did is in the United Kingdom, there's the Junior Premier League, which is one of the most robust youth programs that underpins the academy system in the UK from 9s to under 18s. Now, what we've done is we've done a deal with the JPL. We don't own it, but what we've done is a deal with the JPL to bring them out to Australia and roll the JPL out in Australia. So what we're doing now is from February, we are going to compete with the state federations in Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland and recruit clubs, teams, schools, academies into the JPL, and we will be one of the foundation teams in the JPL. So we will have our juniors competing again in Queensland, but that JPL will actually be a national competition. So in 2026, 2027, we'll actually roll it out to other states, Western Australia, Adelaide, Tasmania. There's been a raft of inquiries. So we did tell Football Australia this because of our issues. We told them what we were doing because we didn't want to surprise anybody. We don't feel it's right to mislead people. And we thought, well, if you're not going to come to the party, then we'll just turn up to the party ourselves.
Oh, that's incredible. In 2027, then perhaps your foot will be back in the door. That's amazing. Okay, so moving on to the Oceania Premier League.
Yeah.
So that's is this an alternative to the national second tier, or is this in addition to the national second tier? Tell us about your bid and what the process is there.
Yeah. So again, we put our EOI in for the OFC Pro League. Now I actually know the guy who sort of was leading it. He's a Pommy guy. So they knew our position within football in Australia, again, without harping on too long. And they knew we got down to being offered a position in the national second division. And the only stumbling block was what we mentioned, which was, we're not willing to hand over the finance required whilst we don't have juniors operating in their leagues. So we're like, well, if we're going to operate our own leagues, then we'll find another senior competition, another professional league somewhere else. And then the Oceania Pro League came online and they said, well, why don't you put an application together? And then we got down to, again, it's either 2 or 3 clubs in Australia. We're one of them. Ironically, Graham, or sadly, because we were de-affiliated in Australia, we required a letter of support from the national body, which is one of the line items for the OFC Pro League criteria. Unfortunately, Football Australia would not provide that letter of support. So, yeah. So you can only assume again that they did that purposely. So we only have their national second division to go at. But what they didn't gamble on was us affiliating in the United Kingdom with the English FA, which we've done. And now we've been granted permission to enter the football pyramid in the United Kingdom. So again, we'll just navigate around things and people who want to try and be obstructive.
That's incredible. So I really have to say I applaud your ambition, and I hope that yeah, other clubs do this because we do need this. We have an A League at the moment which is struggling. I'm glad it's there. I don't wish the clubs harm. I hope that they all
Yeah.
succeed. At the moment, we haven't been producing players at the same level. Yes, slightly better now that we've have A League academies.
Yeah.
Great, but still not the same level as you say the golden generation. We haven't had a national youth league for the majority of the A League, and even when we have, it hasn't been home and away.
Yeah.
There's been bizarre obstacles in front of the national second tier, and yeah, it's just been a complete mess. So yeah, is there anything, I don't know if the governance is having these issues here, is there any advice you give to clubs out there who want to follow a same path and trying to lift the standard of football in Australia?
Well, there was nothing broken with the game in Australia, Graham. So, in my view, what they had with the NSL and what they had with the Australian Institute of Sport and the investment they put in it, they were doing relatively well. Now, I've spoken to a lot of people on different podcasts over this last month because of what we're doing here in the United Kingdom. And you look at the amount of young players that are leaving the shores of Australia, not through our programme, we're just one of many programmes, but some of the best young talents that are coming through the A-League clubs that see no future in the A-League and are now signing with professional clubs in different countries, including the UK, is disappointing. It's disappointing. Now, if that doesn't ring alarm bells for Football Australia and the game in Australia, then I don't know what does. Now, you could say, well, that's quite perverse or contradictory of what you said at the very beginning, Mel, about the golden generation, the 20 players, or the 13 players playing in the English Premier League in the early 2000s. Now, that's true, but they didn't have the National Premier Leagues at that stage, and they didn't have the National Youth League or the underpinning A-League youth teams at that stage either. So now they're still losing players to other countries because they know the development program in Australia is poor at best. Now, the other thing we've got, Graham, is we have a relationship with the Welsh FA and the English FA because of my links with the English FA, but we have an opportunity to put Australian coaches through UEFA qualifications in the United Kingdom because the coach education system in Australia is also failing. So it seems to be a knock-on effect of continuous manipulation of the game and continuous change of the game where there's no continuity and consistency, which is seeing a lot of frustrated parents and a lot of frustrated players migrate from the shores of Australia over to Europe and other parts of the world.
So, with all those issues, is there a hope that we can see both in the OFC Pro League and in the national second tier home and away in a couple of seasons, or is it one or the other for you guys?
No, we would be happy to do both. And we do have the means to be able to do both. And it would be great to have these players playing and educated in the UK to direct them back towards the shores of Australia and play in the national second division and, provide an opportunity to go into the Oceania, as well as recruiting some good players from Oceania because we have a relationship in the Solomon Islands where we can bring them over to Australia into our full-time academy and again help to strengthen the game in Australia. So very short-sighted and narrow-minded from the governing body as to what our capabilities or agenda was actually about. Now, I say this to people, Graham, because it's true. Now, I've done more damage to my reputation in Australia by challenging people than sitting on the fence and agreeing with people. It's not the type of person I am. I don't need a job with Football Australia, and I don't need a job with any state governing body either. That's not my purpose. There's plenty of people out there that suffer with confirmation bias. They nod with the powers that be and tell them how good they are instead of just being honest. We're here to develop the game, Graham. Now, if you are a true developer, then you will means test everything that comes across you as a development coach. We can't agree on everything. If we're going to truly move forwards, we're going to butt heads. We're going to disagree. Disagreeing is healthy. And I always say to people that, a discussion will beat an argument all day long in football. So, in order to make the game move forwards, like we definitely do want to do, then we're going to have some difficult conversations with people. That's not to fall out with people. That's not the type of people we are. We just want the game to move forwards, and we want to contribute to that, not for any personal accolades. I couldn't care less. I'll put people in front of me to take the accolades, but I just want to help move the game forwards, to maximise the opportunity for the country now, which I call home, because I'm actually an Australian citizen. I'm a passport holder, so I want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
So that sounds like a very good attitude. I hope many clubs follow your lead, and I hope the governing bodies do show some more flexibilities in some of these difficult conversations. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us, Melvyn. Yeah. Where can they catch you on Twitter or on social media, or possibly even...
As long as they follow Sunshine Coast FC Facebook, they'll get a lot of our information. And, if people are serious about developing their game, I'm not trying to sell a program. I don't need to sell a program, but, if people want to have a look at what we're doing in the United Kingdom, then, we will bring them up to our full-time academy on the Sunshine Coast, which is a mirror image. And again, it's all part and parcel of trying to move the game forwards. If the state federations, Graham, and the competitions in Australia were doing such a great job, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing today, and private academies wouldn't exist either.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for joining us on Green and Gold FC. Don't forget to join us on the forums if you have any comments, as well as Twitter, Spotify, and YouTube. Please remember to like and subscribe. Until next time, that's all we have. Bye for now.